All right, guys, thanks for coming. I'm going to just do a quick, brief introduction to our guest speakers, and then let them take it away. So, would like to give a warm welcome to both Matt Leighton and Josh Binswanger. I'm going to talk a little bit about Josh, and then Josh is going to tell you a little bit about Matt. So Josh started working in TV at age 14. He has been a news anchor in Washington, New York, and Boston. He was a host on the History Channel for 5 years, and currently he is the morning anchor for WBZ Radio. So let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Josh Binswanger.
Who's psyched not to be in class right now? Yeah, okay, good. I want to thank Ms. Doyle for introducing me and pronouncing my last name properly. You'd be surprised that the name Binswanger would present so many problems, but in a day and age when we have anchors with names like Miklashevsky, Brzezinski, Siegenthaler, that Binswanger wouldn't be that hard. But I take a certain amount of pride in the fact that I've been misintroduced more often than most of my colleagues in broadcasting. Jim Bishtinger, Joe Berwanger, was introduced once to a college audience as John Bongwater. But my favorite, true story, at the State House on Beacon Hill, Governor Weld was there, Senators Kennedy and Kerry. A woman introduced me as Jack Bangschlanger. So, you know, if we get a chance to talk afterwards, feel free to call me Jack. It works, and that seems to be fine. Let me a quick show of hands. How many people have a newspaper delivered to their home every day? How many of those newspapers are the Boston Globe or the Boston Herald? How many are the Metro West Daily News? Okay, generally, do you get most of your information from your smartphone or from the newspaper? Smartphone, okay. And just curious, shout out what website do you go to if you want information? The New York Times. Okay. Good. Another quick show of hands. How many people believe in fake news? And how would you define fake news?
News that people want to hear that isn't true.
Okay. You guys agree with that definition of what fake news is or isn't? Okay. I'm going to continue this conversation and talk more about the news business and where it's at today, and specifically what's happening in the news and how it impacts all of us, but specifically you guys in just a minute. Ms. Doyle just gave you a quick sketch of my life. I moved to Bangor, Maine in the late 70s and they had a volunteer opportunity at a local TV station. I was 14. I did a story that night on the news, and I loved it, and so I volunteered there for the summer and started covering local high school sports and college sports for 3 years and interned at different TV stations around the country. So I got lucky because I found something I loved to do, and I was young and learned an awful lot at a very early age. And I was in a small town, so they needed people who could do the work, and I got a chance to do everything. Shoot film, write scripts, contribute stories, the whole 9 yards, which is harder in this day and age. But there are great places where you can start. For example, at Northborough Public Access. You guys have a radio station here. It's awesome. A lot of schools don't. So there are a number of opportunities and windows for you guys to pursue if you choose to go down this particular path or explore this particular business. I went on to work in Washington, D.C. and New York. I was at the History Channel for 5 years. It can be a very interesting and fascinating business. And we can talk more in a few minutes about what's essential to grow in this business and have fun with it at the same time. But I digress because I need to introduce Matt Leighton. In the morning at WBZ, we get up long before the crack of dawn. You cannot function without caffeine and sugar, maybe chocolate, other things to get us going. But Matt is a producer, and I can't do my job without Matt. Matt is getting interviews with reporters from around the world. Matt is tracking down people to talk about things. Matt is following the news as it's happening throughout the course of the morning and letting us know so we can jump on it as soon as we can. He is a proud graduate of this institution from the class of 1979. He was an editor of the school newspaper. It had a very different name at that time. He'll tell you about that. He also is the architect of what was the senior lounge, which I understand has now been appropriated by the cafeteria. Suffice it to say, he is a proud T-Hawk, and I would like to introduce Matt Leighton.
I don't have anything else to add. My first exposure to radio was here at Algonquin, although they did not have a radio station here. The radio station I worked at was WCUW at Clark University in Worcester. I don't know if is it still on the air? Does anybody know? I'll take that as a no. And I mean, it was just a college station. And I used to drive in there like once a week, and they let me read public service announcements on the air. And I thought, I'm never going to survive in this world of radio. But I did. And I went to UMass. I developed my own major with communication and business. The program's called the Bachelor's Degree with Individual Concentration, BDIC. So I was able to take business courses as well as communication, because I knew I wanted to eventually run and own my own television station. I applied for an FCC license, never materialized, for Channel 33 in Worcester. I think I might still have the application. UMass, I was a program director at a local cable channel for one of the residential areas, and that primarily entailed picking out what movies we're going to run that night. But it was like television and radio are kind of exciting to me. Something about broadcasting, I guess. I grew up, in the 60s and 70s watching television, so that's probably had the strongest influence on me. After UMass, I landed a job at a Worcester radio station, WORC, which was playing top 40 music on an AM signal that nobody listened to. And I was an account representative, so I had to sell advertising. Advertising, account reps were the stepping stone to going into management. So I was okay at selling. We changed format to country. Nobody else in Worcester was playing country music. We built brand new studios, and I couldn't really sell too much country music in Worcester because it was a brand new thing for a lot of businesses. I ended up going to Maine, similar track, working for a group of radio stations based out of Auburn, Maine, but covered Lewiston and Portland. I was an anchor and reporter. I became news director of the 3 radio stations, and eventually became assignment editor at the NBC station in Portland, WCSH, and then ended up becoming news director at the new Fox station in Portland. We only had a 10 o'clock newscast at the time, but we had the X-Files and great shows. Well, that's about it. So that was exciting, and we had new owners. They wanted to expand the facility. We built a brand new station. I designed a newsroom from the ground up and hired some great talent, expanding our staff. Some of the talent that worked for me, you may recognize. Pete Bouchard, who was the weather guy for Channel 7 and now for NBC Boston. J.C. Monahan worked at Channel 5 for many years and is now over at NBC Boston too. They're taking everybody. A lot of great people that I got to work with, and had an opportunity to come back to Boston at WBZ. It's been 16 years. I was a morning editor. I was a website editor. And then they offered me the morning producer position, and I accepted it. So that's kind of where I am, a long journey, but a lot of experience, and it's been quite a ride so far. So, toss it back to Josh. To you in the studio.
How many people here are with this school newspaper? Okay, and how many folks are involved with the radio station? Got it. What's the hardest thing, for the newspaper folks, what's the hardest thing about your job? Anybody? Or what's the most fun thing about the job? Don't all go at once. What's that? Writing articles. Yeah, writing is hard. And the more you write, the better you get at it. In this particular business, the more you do it, the better you will get at it. And you're going to make mistakes along the way, and don't ever beat yourself up for that. You have to fail in order to learn. That's just part of the business. And the fact that you're getting a start now at the high school level is great, because some people don't find their path or their vision until they get into or even out of college. There's a lot of pressure on you guys today to decide early on what you want to do, who you want to be, where you want to live. If that works for you and you get on a track and you follow that for the rest of your lives, that's great. But you don't have to. And you shouldn't feel pressure at this stage to know exactly what it is that you want to do. You'll discover that. That's a great thing about college, that it opens up a lot of different things in life to you to try. It's like going to the buffet. I'll try a little bit of that, I'll have a taste of that, I'll have a taste of that, and if you like it, you'll pursue it more and see if it turns out to be something that you develop a passion for. But writing is essential. If you're going to be in communications, if you're going to be a journalist, whether it's in radio, print, or television, you have to know how to write. You have to know how to read, which I take it as a given because you're all sitting in this high school. But read with passion as well. And then you develop a way to communicate, whether through prose on the written page or the electronic page, whether through your voice on radio, or whether through a combination of all of those things on television. Some people it comes to naturally. Some people it takes a little bit of time to develop a style and figure out, who you want to be. And there are plenty of people on television who are nothing like they are in real life. They have adopted a persona to be who they are. Characters from, I don't know, there's a host of TV shows about behind the scenes in newsrooms and whatnot. Some of them are pretty accurate. There's a Ted Baxter in a lot of newsrooms across this country. This was from a sitcom in the 70s or 80s called The Mary Tyler Moore Show. And he always talked like this, and anywhere he went, it was, he never had a chance to turn it off. He didn't know how to turn it off. That was just how he was. And there was an era in television and radio when that's what people wanted. They wanted that voice of God to come and tell them exactly what was going on. There was a guy in New York named Roger Grimsby who began every newscast with, "I'm Roger Grimsby, hear now the news," as if he was the only oracle to provide information that was pertinent and relevant to your daily lives. There was a guy in Cincinnati named Al Shuttlecutty. You think my last name is bad. Al Shuttlecutty did the Al Shuttlecutty News. It was that personal. And he was on the air for like 35 years. So it's grown over time. And I think the hardest challenge for you guys today is the plethora or the wealth of sites or places to go to get information. And you all said pretty quickly, well, I go to my smartphone. And then you can choose millions of sites to go to get whatever information you want. So it's hard. Anybody here read the newspaper every day? One person in the back, okay? And one person here, okay. The sites that you guys find to go to for news, how did you come about that particular site? Did somebody tell you about it, or did you find it and discover it yourself? Both? A little bit of both? Parents. Okay. And you're asking them where you should go to get information, or they're suggesting that you should go to a particular site to find out more about what's going on? Suggestions. Okay. Well, you're lucky in that, specifically where you are here, you got 4 newspapers to choose from if you so wish. The Boston Globe, the Boston Herald, the Worcester Telegram, and the Metro West Daily News. That's lucky. You've got a lot of information to disseminate. And the amazing thing and the great thing about the newspaper that you hold in your hand, not that you go to online, is that you go through each section and you're going to find a headline or a picture that's going to catch your eye. It's personal. It's whatever it is that works for you, but that's going to catch your eye, and you're going to read that article. Now, you're not looking for that article. You have no interest in that article, but you find it, and you learn something you didn't know. And that's the great thing about papers, because you're going through and finding things that you might not have had any interest or knowledge of beforehand, and now you do. The most important thing, we'll get Matt's take on this too, is to be well-informed. And not only to be well-informed, but to draw your own conclusions. Television has gotten into a world of black, white, red, blue. You're with us or you're against us. Now, that works. Puts people in the seats. Has people watching on a regular basis. It doesn't mean that what you're listening to is thoughtful, intelligent, or relevant. A large part of it is noise. Because by taking a stance to the extreme, whether that's the left or the right, you're going to get people to watch. Either because they hate what you're saying or they love what you're saying. And then everything in between. And so Matt was talking about growing up with a handful of stations in this market. And I grew up in and around New England too. There were fewer choices. And the local stations were covering national and international news. Back in our day, the local anchors would go and cover all the political conventions. The local anchors would go to the Olympics. Local anchors would go to the Oscars. It was a great time to be in TV because they sent you everywhere. Now with all the different satellite operations and cable operations, you've got one guy who sits in a booth who delivers information for 60 stations around the country. But the long and the short of it is, be aware of what it is that you're watching and listening. And make your own choice. Just because somebody's bloviating about this or that, the president is this or that, the police chief is this or that, fine. Listen to both perspectives and draw your own conclusions. Inform yourself as much as you can by reading the newspapers, by going to whatever websites you guys visit on your smartphones. That choice is up to you. But go to more than one. So someone said the New York Times is where they go to get their information. I lived in New York for 15 years. If I want to know what's happening around the world, I read the New York Times. If I want to know what's happening in New York, I read the New York Post. Okay? Some people would draw the same conclusion with the Herald and the Globe. That's up to them. But there are a variety of sources. You should know what those options are and tap into as many of them as you can and form your own opinions. Draw your own conclusions. Engage each other or your families in conversation about what is or isn't happening. Look, the world is a pretty crazy place. And what happened 2 weeks ago in Parkland, Florida, has happened far too often. Not just in the past, this year alone. There have been 18 incidents of weapons in schools since January 1st. That's insane. But that's the world we're living in. That opens up a host of conversations about a variety of subjects. Not just gun control, but safety measures, about access to different things. Have you guys been talking about this amongst yourselves in terms of what's happened, in terms of the protests that are happening out of this? What's amazing is that, from my perspective, having been in the news business for a long time, your voice is the one that resonates the most today. The kids who died at Sandy Hook were 6 years old. Their voices were too young. The kids who died in Florida were high school students. Neither situation should ever have happened, but they did. And the response from high school students across this country, this march that's going to take place on March 24th, this issue is not going to go away, and it shouldn't. And you guys can help bring that to the fore if it's something you're passionate about. And going forward in life, whatever strikes your passion, whatever motivates you, you should be passionate about, and you should be vocal about it. You can post stuff online, you can tweet, you can organize and make it a bigger message if you want to. But your voices should be heard on whatever you think is important. And if people aren't paying attention, find a way to make them pay attention, because your voices count. I think we have a mixture of sophomores, juniors, seniors. Is that correct? So some of you can't drive yet. Some of you can't vote yet. But you are the citizens, you are the leaders of tomorrow. And so the more informed you are, the better citizen, the better leader you will be. What am I missing? I will also say, and I wasn't joking when I introduced Matt, there is no I in team. It's not just a cliche, it's true. You can't work in the news business without a good team of people. And there are much more folks behind the scenes than you'll ever see in television or in radio. We have about 8 to 10 people in the morning. We have a traffic team that's covering the highways and byways around Massachusetts. We have a weather team that we work with on the TV side. We've got a big storm coming tomorrow. It's going to be worse than the storm we had in January. It's going to be more of a rain event than a snow event, but the winds are going to be stronger. That's when people tune into a station like ours. It's what's happening now. We keep you up to date as often as we can. There's a station in New York called 1010 Wins, and their tagline is, give us 22 minutes and we'll give you the world. That's basically what we do. The difference is we can break away from our format anytime we need to if something's happening in the immediate. Whether that's something in Parkland, Florida, or whether it's the president making an address, or whether it's Vladimir Putin announcing that Russia has a new interballistic missile that can go anywhere it wants to. So our focus is to be on top of something as fast as we can, but that takes a number of people to do so. We have 2 or 3 reporters. We have Matt producing. We have another kid named Drew Mulholland, who is editor, who is putting a rundown together. And then Deb Lawler, who is an excellent, excellent anchor and reporter who's been in this business for 30-some years. And I go into the studio and deliver the news. And I will tell you, having been in television, radio is a lot harder. Because in TV, you go through all your information, you edit your scripts, you get everything set, then 10 minutes beforehand, you go and slather on more makeup than Phyllis Diller or Coney the Clown, and you go sit down, you put your IFB in your ear, and somebody else does all the technical work. In radio, you are air traffic controller, pilot, and passenger all in one. They shove me into a booth, and they go, okay, don't screw it up. And you basically have 4 screens in front of you. One has all the commercials that you have to air. One is a prompter that has your script. One is something called the dashboard. I have no idea what that means, but it has the stock ticker, it has the temperature, the weather forecast, the time of day, and then there's a backup computer to the right in case all things go to hell in a handbag and you have something to back up what you need to do. And it's a hamster wheel. We go on the air at 5 a.m. I'm on from 5 to about 5:15, 5:16. I come off for 15 minutes, Deb goes on, and then I'm back on at 5:30. And it continues and continues and continues until 10 o'clock. And then we have a midday shift that comes in. So, long story short, it's a lot of fun. No, I don't sleep. No, I haven't figured out how to sleep, but we'll get there at some point in time. It just comes with the job. But every day is different. Every day is interesting, and you're constantly learning in this business. And if you're not learning, you're teaching yourself about information you might not know about. So if it's a stock market issue, you better understand the financial markets. If it's a political issue, whether it's local or national, you need to know what it is you're covering and what you're discussing so you can ask the right questions. And there are no wrong questions. There aren't. Don't ever be intimidated by thinking your question's not going to be smart enough or that people are going to make fun of the question. Ask. It's always better to ask. There are dumb answers, but there are no dumb questions. Your turn.
Visual aid?
No visual aids. I'll tell you what. So, how many people have listened to the station before, or recognize the call letters? And is that because the parents have it on in the car, or you guys turn it on yourselves sometimes? Be honest. Parents. Okay. So, I'll play you a couple of clips just to give you an example of what we do, and I'm going to play you a couple of commercials. We have a production guy named Michael Coleman. He's also a part-time stand-up comedian. He's really funny, but he's really talented. So he put together a collage for the Patriots leading up to the Super Bowl. And we'll play that for you in a second. But he also comes up with spots for the station. We'll play this.
Part of a bay. Today it connects BU to the West End, hugging the Esplanade. If you can maneuver around the potholes and low bridges, feel proud. But if there's a breakdown, or you're driving anytime after 3 p.m., you're doing everything but driving on it. It's Storrow Drive, and it's one more reason why you need traffic on the threes. Only here, WBZ News Radio 1030.
Okay, so that's one type of spot that Michael has done. Let's play another one for you.
Have you heard the news?
We have breaking news.
New information now coming into our...
Do you want to know?
A developing story now
A
regarding...
first-hand account of the circumstances.
Do you want to learn?
An update on the situation.
Details into
Do you want to stay ahead?
This just ended the
State Senate.
Turn on the knowledge.
Turn on.
Come on, turn the radio on.
Come on.
Tune in.
in the WBZ newsroom.
Turn on the
Now, the
information.
smart thing
This could be...
Now, the impact this will have... This is big news.
Come on, turn on.
Turn on.
Turn the radio on.
WBZ News Radio 1030.
Okay, so I want to play you something now that Michael put together for the Pats before they went to the Super Bowl. And if you would indulge me, close your eyes and listen intently and see if you can pick out certain pieces of what you're about to hear. Because he taps into movies, television, music, sound effects, whatnot, to create a collage of sound. But he is a genius when it comes to producing audio entertainment. So take a listen to this.
What's going on? You got a Patriot in here.
I'm here to play football.
Here are the New England Patriots.
Football, huh? That's all.
All sights are set on one
A small band of Patriots.
a chance to play and win
Oh, man, Patriots.
in the Super Bowl.
Hey, guys, where else would you rather be? Your father was a fighter.
Patriot.
I'm the Patriot. He's a Patriot. 30 seconds left. Brady rifles to the corner. Oh, it's caught. Touchdown. Tom Brady delivers in the clutch.
If we just play Patriot football, this would be our time.
A Patriot on the first order. Patriots.
Football.
Football. Patriots. It's a great game.
Football is about harnessing aggression into a team effort to achieve perfection.
People can learn a great deal from a skillfully played football game.
Being a Patriot my entire career, I'm very proud of.
What is your interest in all this? Well, sir, it'll prove that I acted as a patriot.
He fires over the middle, caught on the slant. Perkin will take it into the end zone for a Patriot touchdown.
I am a valuable commodity. I go across the middle. Catch the ball. Right in the cover. Touchdown. Touchdown. I make big catch.
Another incredible drive led by Tom Brady. Rebounded back, intercepted by another Huff-Many team.
And the Patriots
Touchdown.
The game embodies what has made our country great. You're not only a sentimentalist, but you've become a patriot.
So what did you hear? Just shout it out. And what movie clips did you hear? Yeah, what else? Jerry Maguire? Remember the Titans? We heard the guy, by the way, the most irritating voice, that screeching voice that kept going, "Let's go, baby!" You know who that was? Tom Brady. Tom Brady. A lot of passion in that man, there's no question about it. But that wall of sound just gives you an example of what you can do with audio, right? Just like you guys go to art class and you've got paints or chalk or computers to use, you use and you listen in a different way. I'll give you one more commercial just to show how humor can be injected into this stuff, because you got to laugh once a day or it's not worth living. It really isn't. Let's see if I can find this. Here we go. Yeah, this is Michael Coleman too.
I'm thinking of a place.
WBZ.
Not just any place.
It's a WBZ.
A radio station with up-to-the-second breaking news, plus traffic and weather together. It's located on AM 1030,
News radio.
on the free iHeartRadio app, and online.
WBZ1030.com.
So, can you guess the place I was thinking about?
Say WBZ now.
Close, actually. It's WBZ News Radio 1030, but better luck next time.
So humor always wins, by the way. If you can inject some humor in a story or at the end of a newscast or somewhere in the newscast, it's great because it touches everybody. If it's just funny, it's funny. What questions do you guys have about journalism, about college or life post-college? We're here to, provide some context and perspective, if that's helpful. Yes, sir.
What are internships in broadcasting?
Internships in broadcasting today are a lot different than they were when we were your age. Not to say that they're better or worse, they're just different. And there's a lot more competition to get them. But the earlier you start, and the biggest trick is not to take no for an answer. So when I was a senior in high school, I took a year off. And all of my fellow graduates were off to college, and I was applying for jobs in television. I sent 75 letters to different TV stations. I got 72 rejections. I wallpapered my room with rejection letters and highlighted, "Dear Mr. Binswanger, we're sorry that we're not going to do X, Y, or Z." But I got 3 acceptances, and I finally chose the one that made the most sense and that worked. I think now today, a lot of internships require you to get school credit of some kind. I'm not sure how that works at Algonquin, or whether that could be used towards a further credit at college. But it's worth looking into if you're going to apply for internships. I think the simple answer to the question is blanket as many stations as you can and don't take no for an answer. Like, let them be very firm in saying no, because doggedness and persistence can often pay off. Who else has questions? Yes. So I got involved in television at 14 because I had moved to Bangor, Maine, which is a city that at that time was about 35,000 people that saw its zenith during the turn of the last century when the logging boom was still a big deal. It was not in great shape. So I was a junior high school student, and they had a job shadowing day. You could follow anybody 18 years of age or older in their job. And so I wrote to the local TV stations, and the guy said, "Sure, come on in." So I had a sport coat and a tie that didn't fit very well, and they had me do a story on another kid who was shadowing somebody at the local Air Force base. And I loved it. I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to learn more about it. So it wasn't an internship, but I said, "Can I volunteer for the summer and just come here and work? Not for pay, but just to learn how to do it." And they said, "Sure." And by the end of the summer, they hired me to be a part-time employee shooting. It was film back then, pre-video. We shot high school sports, college sports at the University of Maine, and occasionally did a piece on the weekends. But I got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. But once you get that first job, and I don't care whatever career you guys pursue, if it's welding, vending machine repair, or journalism, it doesn't matter. Once you have a job, it makes you more valuable because you're in the door. So sometimes it's just getting in that door, and then you're off and running. Other questions? Let me ask you this. How many people are on Twitter? How many people get their news from Twitter? Kind of. That's good. I like that. That's a nonverbal answer. That's great. How about Facebook? How many people are on Facebook? How many people get their news from Facebook? Yeah, okay. What's that? Those are, again, those are, it's tricky because it's personal posts from folks who can remain anonymous if they choose to. So it's hard to validate what it is they may or may not be posting and or saying. So be careful with what you digest and what you discern to be fact or not. Let me ask you for a second about what happened in Florida and how that makes you guys feel. And to what extent you've discussed it at home, to what extent you've discussed it with your classmates, or to what extent you've discussed it here at school. Has it come up in conversation? It has. With teachers in class, with your fellow classmates at lunch? Oh, both. Okay. If you had to give me an adjective to describe how you feel today in the wake of all that stuff, just toss them out. Frustrated. Targeted. Overwhelmed. What, frustrated by what?
Just like the lack of response, with legislative actions.
So she's frustrated by the lack of response from any legislative response in the wake of these shootings. You said overwhelmed. In what way?
Kind of like everything's happening so fast, and with social media, you hear about everything all at once, and you kind of don't sometimes know how to feel, and it takes a couple of days.
That's a good point. She was saying you can be overwhelmed by the social media aspect because there's so much happening in real time. It's hard to disseminate all that and compartmentalize it. What was the third adjective? Targeted.
Just being in school with no protections in place, and with the legislators, it puts a target on the back for anyone with a gun.
So she feels targeted, and you're hoping that there is some legislative response or some better step to make you feel less so, right? These are interesting times we live in. There's an awful lot of rhetoric out there from a variety of different sources. Washington, Beacon Hill, Russia, the Middle East. How do you guys feel about the world at the moment? Throw out some adjectives. I'm just curious. Powerless. Hostile. Different? Indifference. Yeah, there's a lot of indifference. You're right. Do you feel that you guys have a voice? Sometimes you do have a voice. There's only a voice if a tragedy occurs. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's oftentimes bad things have to happen for people to effect change. And one would have thought that after what happened in Connecticut, we wouldn't have had a situation like we did in Florida. That's part of why it's so important for you guys to be informed, for you guys to know what's going on in your backyard, in your community, in your state, in your country, in your world, because it's yours. It's going to be yours before you know it. And the more you know about it, the more you're engaged with it, the bigger a part of it you can be. And that's not a call to action. I'm just saying that you discover yourself and what your passions are, academically, personally, etc., over the next couple of years, you're going to find your inner voice, your inner passion, and pursue that. And there is no right or wrong path. Everybody's going to carve their own way. Don't beat yourself up because it's not happening as fast as you want, or it's not as easy as you thought it might be. It's going to take hard work, and it's going to take time. But you will get there because of that hard work and because of the time you put into it. It's no different than studying for a test, taking an exam. You got to put in the time or you're not going to do well, right? Same thing with life. The difference is you're doing something that you love, hopefully, or something that excites you, challenges you, gets you out of bed in the morning, or in our case, 2 o'clock in the morning, which is just sick. There's no reason this should be happening. What else? Will you have some swag? Yes, Ms. Doyle.
Could you tell us about maybe times that when you're on the radio that you might have made a mistake or actually
Every day. Ms. Doyle asked if there are times when I was on the radio when I made a mistake. I said, sure. Oh, gosh. Well, I'm not proud. Yeah, a couple times you get misinformation. Let's just put it this way. I was at BZ back in the 90s. Tom Bergeron had left to go to work for Fox, and I was doing the noontime news. It was like an hour-long newscast, and my job was to interview celebrities and artists, chefs, that kind of thing. And we had a Christmas party the night before, and I stayed out a little too late. And the next day, we had a satellite interview with a woman from Santa Barbara who had written some book about something I can't even begin to remember. But you feign interest and energy because she's there, and what happens when you're on television, you're looking into the camera, but you can see yourself, and then you can see the guest looking back at you, so you know when you're on. And the woman's name was Barbara something. I said, tell me, Barbara, where'd you get the inspiration for your book? And she starts to talk, and they go to a close-up of her, and I'm putting my head in my hands and just going like this and rocking back and forth. And she finishes her answer. You can tell by the tone of her voice. And I sit up and I go, so, Barbara, tell us, where'd you get the inspiration for your book? And she goes, as I just said, and then you realize that you've made a mistake and you feel like an idiot, and you just keep going on. When you make mistakes, just keep going on. Or stop and then draw more attention to the fact that you've made a mistake. You'll mispronounce words. Like at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm often stumbling over my words because I'm just not fully awake yet. And if it's international stories, some of the names can be hard to pronounce, so you're going to make mistakes. I think the end all and be all is you get to a point where you're just comfortable. And when you make a mistake, if you laugh at yourself and keep on going, that's the best thing you can do. I've worked with other people who are very highly strung, and they work themselves into a fever, and when something goes wrong, they lose it. And that just draws more attention to the fact that you've made a mistake. So just laugh at it and keep on going. Yes, sir?
I'm kind of curious how you were speaking about Twitter earlier, how that maybe changes the job of the newsroom, especially with the rush to get things out. It used to be you think about journalists tracking down that second confirmation, looking for sources. And nowadays, something like Parkland, we're getting pictures live on Twitter. Major presidential decisions are being announced over Twitter haphazardly sometimes. How do you feel in the newsroom sort of changed with that desire to get out accurate news, but also to get it out timely? How has Twitter put pressure on you?
We treat it as we each in the newsroom follow our own accounts. A lot of them are duplicates, but we like to follow verified accounts, other news organizations. We treat it almost as I have TweetDeck up on one of my screens at my desk, so I can look at multiple columns of Twitter messages that are going out and posts. And I kind of treat it like a AP, Associated Press wire service. So I'm seeing what other people are reporting. A lot of times it's stuff we're not going to report, but it's kind of like, that's interesting, that might be used in another story. A lot of stations post breaking news through Twitter. And most of the time, we're kind of familiar with what's going on anyway, but you're more aware of what other news organizations are covering. When it comes to a presidential tweet in the morning, you look at how significant that might be in policy. Is it something different than what has been discussed from the previous day? How outlandish it is, or whatever. You got to take a number of different things into consideration as to whether it's newsworthy.
I think that's the challenge, because they are instant, and as you guys are saying, you're getting live video feeds from any breaking story anywhere. There's no filter anymore, or less of a filter than there used to be, because TV was the conduit to provide you with that information. So we've come a long way from November 1963. It's a much different world. Now for YouTubers, okay, so Logan Paul goes into that forest in Japan, right? Okay, no. I'm saying, and what happens? He loses his YouTube channel and loses his sponsorship because he made a bad decision, right? And it's hard. Okay, so there's somebody who's not that much older than you guys. He has to make a decision. Am I going to post this on my page, or am I going to not? There are 1,000 different ways to refer to it without showing it. And he chose to show it, and he paid a price for it. In our business, as we said earlier, what differentiates our station from the NPR stations, BUR and GBH, we can break format anytime, and often do. But we double check before we do so to make sure that we're right. So what we have, there's a construct. It's like a clock. If you look at a face clock, we'll do 3 minutes of news off the top. Then we go to traffic and weather. Then we do another little story, and then we go to business news, and then about 2 minutes of stories, and then sports, and then I'm out. Deb comes in, and the cycle continues. So that's the loose description of the format. The point is, if something's happening, we'll dump out of all of that and go directly to a reporter or a witness or somebody who's on scene. So as an example, in Florida, we were getting all this information that was coming in, but a lot of it was dated. It was hours old. And then finally we had a reporter named Jim Ryan who was on the ground, on the campus, at the school. So we talked to him for 4 minutes. And people are yelling, get back to the clock. It's like, forget the clock. Here's somebody who's there who can answer any question we have in real time and clarify what's happened and what hasn't. So those kinds of opportunities you yearn for, because it simplifies and makes clear what's going on.
Who's ready?
Yes, I have a question for each of you, actually. For the Twitter, what is a news source that you guys get a lot of information from that wouldn't be kind of the main ones that everyone's heard of? And then, while he's answering, if you can think of what were your most memorable interviews, either TV or radio, that you've done?
Source that's not a news organization, maybe a politician who's making a statement about something that's going on in Washington or in Florida most recently. A lot of them are news websites, the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, the networks. We follow individual reporters from like CBS and ABC because we're affiliate with those networks. It depends on the individual, but there are numerous sources out there that are very reliable in different topics of whether it's politics, in Washington or in Boston.
Yeah, I think we're coming up on an election cycle. So everybody who's a member of Congress is up for re-election in November. So we have to be careful if they're engaged in a race and they tweet something that we use, we have to make sure we balance that by using whatever their opponents are tweeting to be fair. So you have to catch yourself when using those kinds of information. Favorite interviews? Least favorite interviews? The ones that are, I mean, yeah, when you connect with somebody, it's fun. When you're, you know, if you have the luxury of time, that's the hardest part about TV is that it's less and less. So like shows like the Charlie Rose Show before he got into trouble are unique because he had a full hour to talk to somebody without commercial interruption. He didn't have to take a 15-minute interview and reduce it to 60 seconds or 40 seconds, which is like a soundbite. You're actually having a conversation. And if the conversation's interesting, it draws you in. I spent half a day with Hank Aaron. You guys know who Hank Aaron is? Hank Aaron was the first ball player to beat Babe Ruth's home run record and also faced incredible amounts of racism throughout his career in baseball. And we talked for 3 hours about starting in the Negro Leagues and then making it to the minors, living on peanut butter and a loaf of bread because they weren't getting paid. And he just stuck with it. Couldn't afford a bat when he was a kid. So he had a broomstick and he put a bottle cap on a wooden fence and practiced every day hitting a bottle cap with a broomstick. Talked about how important it was to be a grandfather. You see people and you're like, oh my God, it's Hank Aaron. Or you see somebody on this, silver screen, oh my God, it's Leo DiCaprio. Like when you sit and start talking to them, they become a human being. Certain politicians were great. I was in Washington for 3 years doing the morning news. We were the sort of local version of Good Morning America or the Today Show. So you'd get foreign dignitaries, members of the cabinet, obviously members of the House and Senate. Those who were direct and didn't bloviate, they were fun. People who'd be honest. And the trick is, with some of these folks, we talked about laughter and how humor is really important. So I'll talk policy and legislation for 4 minutes, and then I'll flip it completely. So Bill Cohen was a senator from Maine for years, and then he was the Secretary of Defense for Clinton. And he came on one day, and we're talking about a security hack at the Defense Department in the White House. Really bad stuff, and he was taking the blame for it. And at the end, I said, I just got to ask you one question. As a fellow resident of Bangor, Maine, for Washingtonians who are going to visit Maine this summer, where do you get the bigger bang for your buck? The Orinoco restaurant or Dysart's truck stop? And he bursts out laughing. And he says, wow, well, you left out Miller's, and then there's the diner that serves the hash. So suddenly he's not a politician, he's a human being. Those moments are fun. But I will tell you, there are other politicians you talk to who it's contentious out of the gate because they're putting on a show. So some folks who shall remain nameless, you're sitting as close as I am to this front row of people, and you're waiting while they adjust lights and futz with stuff, and so would you like a cup of coffee, or can I get you something to drink? And they ignore you completely. Like you're not even there, like, ugh, I can't be bothered. And as soon as the red light goes on, like, it is such a pleasure to be with you. And you're like, okay, great. Like, thank you very much. So sometimes you don't know what's happened before. So if an interview starts off contentious, something may have transpired before the cameras go on that you don't know about. And you have to deal with it in the moment. So, but I think it's cliched, but you're learning every time you talk to somebody. So if you've done your homework and they came to play, it's fun. So Peter O'Toole was a famous actor. He was Lawrence of Arabia. He's in a movie called My Favorite Year. He was in Troy with Brad Pitt and a whole slew of folks. I had a chance to interview him. He was 80 years old. He hadn't done a press junket since Lawrence of Arabia in 1962. We're at the Essex Hotel in New York. He comes in. I go, so nice to meet you. He's had a couple cocktails because that's just who he is. And I sit down and I go, so I thought we'd talk about, and he puts his hand on my arm and he goes, don't worry, dear boy. You play your part and I'll play mine. So it's like, okay, let's go. You just dance. But they're fun. And they're rare that someone comes in who's that comfortable, confident, what have you.
Yes.
Growing up in a different generation, we were sheltered from the news. And when you first started out, you asked, how do you get your news? And typically everyone said their smartphone. How do you think that affects our generation now with a lot of the different mental illnesses out there, such as anxiety, depression, things like that? Because literally, we were sheltered. We didn't know a lot of things until either we were told, either from our parents or from the adults. They kind of like filtered through what they wanted to share with us. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, they're being shared with constantly.
Correct.
And you going from probably my generation to their generation, how do you view that?
So the question, I don't know if you could hear the question, it's about we were somewhat sheltered when we were growing up because there was a filter with news coverage on television or radio, and the newspapers are still the newspapers. And it's hard. If you guys are alone at night and something bad happens and you get swept up in texting back and forth about it or going on Twitter or Facebook and you're sort of absorbing all this stuff by yourself with no one to talk about it with or clarify stuff, that's hard. I don't have an easy answer, but I think the most important thing you can do, this applies to everybody, this is teachers, students, everybody, you talk about it. And I don't mean texting about it with an emoji and an acronym. I mean actually having a conversation, because texts and messages, inter-office emails are 9 times out of 10 misinterpreted. Oh, what'd you say that for? No, you don't understand. That's not what I meant. Oh, yeah? 18 minutes, go back and forth. If you just walk down the hall and said, hey, Bob, oh, okay, now I understand, fine. It's important to engage. It's funny that they refer to these things as social media, because I would say it is desocializing society to a certain point. It's great. It's awesome. I can FaceTime somebody in South Africa. Hey, it's crazy what we can do with technology. But we're not having conversations. I was with my daughter about 6 months ago driving with some friends of hers up to Maine, and I've got 4 girls in the car, and I'm hearing, they're texting each other. They're sitting right next to each other, and they're texting each other. So I pulled over and I said, give me the phones. Let's have them, okay? You can have them back when we get out of the car. Let's have a conversation. Or you get to choose the radio channel for 15 minutes, and it's your turn and your turn. If you're with each other, engage each other. It will make a difference. If you're bothered by something and your best friend is up at 2 o'clock in the morning, great. Text them to get in touch. But a conversation carries a lot more weight and allows for a lot more expression and understanding than an email, a tweet, or a text. All right, I did bring some swag. I don't have enough for all of you, but we could, by the way, Matt, as a graduate, would like to share with you, he's not giving these away, but he did bring some things here. This is his, well, here, I'll be Carol Merrill. It's his gym t-shirt. A star tennis player for the Algonquin Tomahawks back in his day, by the way. And by the way, Matt shows up today in the office. He's wearing his class ring from 1979 that he hasn't had on since I've been there. Glass ring. Could use a polish. And then we have a newspaper. Now, do you guys know what the title of the school newspaper is today? It used to be, yes, the Smoke Signal. That was your high school newspaper in 1979.
I was our athletic director, Coach Burns. And I was the layout editor, whatever that meant, back in 1979. And I did the cartoon on the back page of this. These were the teachers' vehicles in the upper parking lot, because everybody had a different vehicle. They had vans, it was just weird vehicles for our teachers. I had to do a cartoon on it, so.
I will extend an invitation to all of you. I know we're getting tired and we're almost done. If anybody wants to come to the station and see how the operation works, you're most welcome. You can get in touch with me through Ms. Doyle. We've talked about maybe having some of the radio folks come as a group, but if people want to come visit, you're most welcome, because the only way to learn how to do it is to see how it works. Yes, question.
I teach a business class at the business students with me. What types of different careers, like besides just
What else have I done besides work in journalism? Besides Wendy's? I got fired from McDonald's at 14. That's a story. Production. Oh, the various, okay. So it's not just, the question was what other aspects go into being in radio or television? Writing, design, graphic design. If you're in television, you guys watch Channel 7 and Channel 4 and 5. There's all sorts of graphics that are being put together. That's a bunch of folks in a back room trying to come up with some creative way to put a title with a picture that captures the story. So graphics, computer animation, writing. If you're going to be on the business side, you could be in sales, advertising. All of these stations, even the NPR stations, yes, they're nonprofit, but they raise money in order to stay on the air. We sell advertising in order to stay on the air. You have to make money in order to keep the process going. So selling advertising, being in a donation area, fundraising, those are all key elements to being in the business. Yes, sir.
Kind of going along with that, for our students, maybe thinking about college student majors, communications.
Communications.
I mean, is that good, or should students specialize in something? What's a good kind of path academically if they're broadcast or journalism or even those things?
It's a great question. The question was, what should you choose if you take a communications degree in college? What does that mean exactly? What's the best path? It's a great question. I don't have an easy answer because it's up to the individual. Communications is this giant umbrella. It's going to be writing and learning how to use a camera and editing and all of the technical stuff that goes along with the creative and intelligent stuff. You have to get in there and do it and then find what aspect of that excites you the most. Maybe it's the business side. Maybe it's finding new ways to, and not just selling ad time, but creating a marketing campaign for a station. Journalism courses.
Business, take journalism. Write. Be a good writer. Tell a story. Be accurate.
Yeah. It's that simple, but it's true. And the way you get good at it is by doing it again and again and again. Find whatever that passion or whatever that curiosity or interest is, try it, see if you like it, and do it for a while. All right, I got 4 or 5 T-shirts and some pens. Does anybody want some swag? Yeah, look right there. Okay. All right. So we'll do this fairly. We'll throw out a couple questions. If you get them right, we'll. What? Yeah, you think so? All right. Swag is, if you go to the Academy Awards, you get a gift bag, right? So I've got T-shirts, I've got pens, and other stuff from the station. I hope they fit. We didn't have a chance to size everybody. The Bushes were presidents 41 and 43. Massachusetts had a father-son combo that were also presidents of the United States. Can you tell me their last name? Adams. How many members are there in the U.S. Congress? How many? You got the last part right, not the first part. How many members are there? 535 is a combination of the Senate and the Congress, just in the Congress. What was that? 435. There you go. What is the capital of Missouri? No. Who said it? You've already got a shirt, brother. I can't help you. No, not Kansas City. I'm sorry? Jefferson City. There you go. Who knew? Okay. Sports category. How many? Okay, yeah, now we got half of them. Okay, fine, about time. Who was the first draft pick of the then Boston Patriots? First draft pick, Heisman Trophy guy. His son is a sportscaster here in town. Works with us at the station. The Patriots were part of the AFL, not the NFL, and he joined the Patriots instead of the Philadelphia Eagles because he was religious and the Patriots played on Saturdays so he could go to church on Sundays. There's a foundation named after him. You should know who this guy is. Any guesses? Burton. Know his first name? Doesn't matter. Here's your t-shirt. His name is Ron Burton. He's an amazing guy and a role model to this day. His son is Steve Burton, who's the sportscaster at Channel 4. All right. I have one more t-shirt to give away. Yeah, look. Make it hard. Okay, let's see. Can anybody name the only president to come from New Hampshire? Dude, you're on fire, but I can't give you another shirt. Oh, great. Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's the echo effect from the Western section. Okay, good. I tell you what. Well, I got a pen for you because you're a fountain of information. All right, thanks for burning the question, though. Now I have to come up with another one. Who is the only president to be elected, then lose, and then get elected again? Nixon. Nixon? Who said Cleveland first? Who said Cleveland first? Okay. Grover Cleveland. Technically our 22nd and 24th presidents, but they don't count them that way. Guys, thank you. I truly do want to thank you for your honesty earlier about what's going on in the world and how you guys feel about it. And I'll just leave you with this, again, an invitation to come to the station if you want. It is important to continue talking to each other about anything and everything that's going on here at school, in your community, and around the world, because it'll make a difference. Thank you very much. Have a good day, everybody.